This 1997 photo shows Princess Diana consoling Elton at the funeral of Gianni Versace. Just 1 month later, Diana would die in a car accident and Elton would perform at her funeral. In 1968, Elton attempted to take his own life again, but was discovered by his best friend Bernie Taupin. Bernie found Elton with his head in the oven, resting on a pillow, with the gas on low and all the windows open. Bernie couldn't stop laughing, and the event inspired Elton's hit song, Someone Saved My Life Tonight. In 1935, Grace McDaniels became a circus freak show star known as the Mule-Faced Woman and was paid $175 per week. Her severe facial deformity was caused by a cancerous lip tumor that ended up taking her life in 1958. At over 3,500 years old, the Senator was the name of the oldest bald cypress tree and the 5th oldest tree in the world overall. But it was accidentally burned down in 2012 when 26-year-old Sarah Barnes lit a fire inside the tree to see the meth she was about to smoke. In 1962, a 10-year-old boy from Mexico City found an industrial radioactive capsule and left it in the kitchen cabinet of his home. Within a few months, the boy, his pregnant mother, his 2-year-old sister, and his grandmother all died from severe radiation sickness. In 1963, President George W. Bush's future wife Laura ran a stop sign and struck another car when she was 17 years old. This resulted in the death of a boy who happened to be Laura's ex-boyfriend and a high school star athlete. She was never charged for the fatal incident. In 2020, 68-year-old actress Anna Obregon lost her only son to cancer when he was only 27 years old. After her son's death, she used his frozen sperm to fulfill her wish of having a granddaughter who she's now raising as her own daughter. In 1986, pro wrestler Kerry Von Erich was in a bad motorcycle accident that nearly ended his life. He had surgery to repair his right foot, but walked on it too early afterwards, forcing doctors to amputate it. But he continued wrestling while secretly wearing a prosthetic, even showering in his boots so that nobody would find out his secret. His injury wasn't known publicly until his death from 7 years later. He was one of 5 Von Erich brothers to die young. Queen Anne of Great Britain tried incredibly hard to leave an heir to the throne. But despite 17 different pregnancies, she died without a single surviving child. She had 7 miscarriages, 5 stillbirths, 2 children who died shortly after birth, 2 who died in infancy, and 1 who died at the age of 11. She was eventually succeeded by her second cousin, George I. Epstein reportedly had cameras literally everywhere on his properties. Maria Farmer, an artist who worked for Epstein in 1996, claimed that Jeffrey showed her a media room in his New York mansion, where several men were monitoring the surveillance footage throughout the house. She was quoted saying, "There were men sitting here in the room, and I looked on the cameras and I saw toilet, toilet, bed, bed, toilet, bed." It was very obvious that they were monitoring very private moments. Maria was also the first person to file a report on Epstein, after she and her sister were both sexually assaulted by Jeffrey and Ghislaine in 1996. Annie Farmer claimed that Epstein had groped, harassed, and crawled into bed with her, whereas Ghislaine had given her an inappropriate topless massage. The girls reported the assaults within months of them happening, but the authorities took no action. In 2002, the girls shared their stories with a writer at Vanity Fair, but it was never published. According to the editor, Epstein had pressured him to terminate the story by mailing him ominous signals. In 1974, Epstein began teaching for teenagers at the Dalton School in New York despite lacking a college degree. He allegedly displayed inappropriate behavior toward underage female students at the time, often flirting with them and even attending parties where young students were drinking. Within 5 years of being dismissed from his position at the school, Epstein founded his own consulting firm. But it's unclear as to how he rose to such enormous power as a financier in such short time. Many believe it was a combination of Ponzi schemes and working with corrupt people and governments. In the 1980s, he reportedly told certain people that he was an intelligence agent and had multiple fake identities. He has been widely called a billionaire, but Forbes disputes this claim, saying that he was more likely worth a fraction of that. Epstein once told a New York Times reporter that he had dirt on many powerful people, including information about their proclivities in recreational drug use. His long list of powerful acquaintances includes Bill Clinton, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Gates, and Prince Andrew. After 9/11, NFL safety Pat Tillman turned down a multi-million-dollar contract with the Cardinals to instead join the U.S. Army. He served several combat tours in the Army Rangers before he was tragically killed in the mountains of Afghanistan. Prior to his death, Tillman called the invasion and occupation of Iraq effing illegal. Initially, the Army reported that Tillman had been killed by enemy fire, but in 2004, the Pentagon notified the Tillman family that he was actually killed by friendly fire from his own side. In 2021, Toronto firefighter Danny Flippidis mysteriously disappeared while on a ski trip in New York. 6 days later, he resurfaced 3,000 miles away in Sacramento, California, with no memory of how he got there. He was wearing the same exact ski gear as when he disappeared, but with no ID except for a credit card. Under intense pressure to succeed, Canadian woman Jennifer Pan deceived her parents for over a decade, leading them to believe she was a successful pharmacist despite never even graduating high school. When her lies finally began to unravel, she had her parents. This image shows doctors in China bowing to an 11-year-old boy after he passed away from a brain tumor in 2014. They're bowing because before he died, he told doctors he wanted to donate all of his organs. As a result, he saved the lives of 4 other children. A serial killer in New Orleans claimed that he would kill again on the night of March 19, 1919. But would spare the occupants of any place where a jazz band was playing. On that night, all dance halls reached maximum capacity, and amateur bands played jazz music at hundreds of house parties. There were no murders that night. Some douchebag tried to destroy a giant snowman with his truck, but he made the fatal error of not realizing it was built on a giant tree trunk and likely smashed his vehicle in the process. 2001, a Utah man was driving a van full of his friends on a mountain when his brakes suddenly failed. But rather than trying to save them, he only tried to save himself by jumping out of the car. He died almost instantly while all of his friends ended up surviving. In 2019, a Brazilian gang leader tried escaping from his 73-year prison sentence by disguising himself as his teenage daughter who was visiting. He planned on leaving her behind in his place, but the guards weren't fooled by his disguise and stopped him at the exit. In 1704, Sir Isaac Newton predicted that the world as we know it would end around the year 2060. He believed that humanity would then progress into an era of divinely inspired peace. Once he was in prison, Kemper was interviewed by former FBI agent Robert K. Ressler. The guards locked them in a small room, and a panic button under the table would alert them when the interview was over. So after the interview, Ressler hit the button, but no one responded. Noticing his panic, Kemper told him, "If I went apeshit in here, you'd be in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you?" 30 minutes later, the guards finally entered the room to retrieve the petrified Ressler. Even though she was completely healthy, Dee Dee Blanchard claimed that her daughter suffered from leukemia, muscular dystrophy, sleep apnea, seeing and hearing problems, asthma, seizures, and brain damage that gave her the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. The healthy girl was forced to stay in a wheelchair, fed through a feeding tube, and supplied air through an oxygen tank. Her mother also regularly shaved Gypsy's head to give her the appearance of a cancer patient. Whenever doctors began catching on to the fact that Dee Dee was completely lying, she would immediately switch to a new one. This is a photo of Dee Dee's medicine cabinet for Gypsy, showing how much unnecessary medicine and supplements she would poison her daughter with each day. On one occasion, Gypsy attempted to run away from home but was soon caught by her mother. Dee Dee then proceeded to smash Gypsy's phone and computer with a hammer, and threatened to smash her fingers next if she ever tried to escape again. After the incident, she kept Gypsy leashed and handcuffed to her bed. Dee Dee would apply a numbing agent to Gypsy's gums before doctor's appointments, which would cause excessive salivation and eventually convince doctors to completely remove Gypsy's salivary glands in a major surgery. This, coupled with side effects from unnecessary seizure medication, caused all of Gypsy's teeth to fall out. People of Maui were basically left on their own last summer when wildfires swept through the region. Luckily, the government was nice enough to offer $700 to each household, while meanwhile sending billions to Ukraine in a war that seems like it's never gonna end. Speaking of, there's another war going on in the Middle East that I'm underqualified to get into. And of course, last February, there was the train derailment and toxic chemical leak in Ohio that the government told everyone was safe, even though it turned waterways rainbow and made some people sound like Mickey Mouse.
I sound like Mickey Mouse.
Yep.
But,
He's got a deep, raspy voice normally.
other than that, I just go and get tested and get checked out.
In October, archaeologists examining a newly discovered ancient Egyptian cemetery found this 3,000-year-old lid on the coffin of an ancient priestess. The internet says it's simply an ancient depiction of Marge Simpson. NASA's James Webb Telescope spotted this massive question mark in deep space. Experts say it might be two galaxies merging, but we may never know for sure. Archaeologists in Germany unearthed this beautifully preserved bronze sword from inside an ancient burial. The 3,000-year-old sword is in such good condition that it still shines. Last summer, a 30-foot-long Native American canoe was recovered from a lake in North Carolina. It's estimated to be at least 1,000 years old. After a recent land survey, Japan discovered that it has 7,000 more islands than previously thought. And finally, last June, a Kentucky farmer stumbled upon a $1 million collection of 700 gold and silver coins dating back to the Civil War. The coins may have been buried there in 1863 to protect them from an invading army, only to be found 160 years later. The photo on the left is the last picture ever taken of Australian kayaker Andrew McCauley. He vanished in 2007 while trying to kayak the Tasman Sea, an extremely dangerous body of water with gnarly waves. His body was never found, but his broken kayak was, along with his camera's memory stick with this photo on it. Winslow's soothing syrup was a popular medicine used in the early 1900s to put infants to sleep. It took 20 years of doctors' complaints before it was finally pulled from shelves for killing thousands of babies. Its main active ingredient was morphine. There's a monument in Georgia that gives instructions in 8 languages on how to rebuild society after an unknown apocalyptic event. It also functions as a compass, calendar, and clock. It appeared in 1980, but nobody knows who built it or why. In 2011, a man passed away while sitting at a train station in China. Upon realizing what happened, a Buddhist monk who happened to be at the station took the man's hand and began praying for him.